Well, hey, I'm back again. I've got another series of cases I want to talk to you about real quickly. First one I'm going to talk about, remember, let's go back here now and let's talk for a little bit. Remember, we started with Schneck on the first week, and we also brought up the case of Debs, Eugene v. Debs, and they said they were arguing against the draft. They said it was a form of slavery, and they ended up going to prison for this because the government said, no, you can't advocate the overthrow of the government. Somehow they were thinking that just because someone thought that the draft was bad, that it would undermine the army and therefore overthrow the government. These were perilous times, it's true. There was communism, different things that were going on, but it was one of those situations where it was a war. And so we said, you know, that the government's a little more strict on our rights during times of war than they are in peacetime. Well, you know, we moved on then and we did this case that followed. It was called Get Low, and it was again a very kind of scary left-wing socialist group, kind of more harsh maybe than some. They were advocating the overthrow of the government. But remember, they were only using words. They were not using weapons. They were not trying to conspire to get bombs. Nothing like that. It was just a matter of putting out leaflets, giving speeches, this type things. But the court said that if there was a dangerous tendency, that dangerous tendency was enough. So even talking about it was a dangerous tendency. So if you want to define this, to put in your wiki, for example, you would say dangerous tendency, you know, even talking about overthrow of the government would be a dangerous tendency toward advocating criminal behavior, terrorism, and treason. The standard, the actual standard, that's the recognized standard, is the one that they made that Tom Clancy movie about called Clear and Present Danger. Clear and present danger is where someone has taken steps to accumulate weapons, kind of like the boys at Columbine or something. If someone had known at all, like say parents, that they both had rooms full of rifles, shotguns, machine guns, propane bombs, you know, all these different things, then something could be done, and that would be a clear and present danger. But just talking about it, or you know, sketching it out on paper or something like that, that is not enough to be a clear and present danger. So these are two different standards. The more relaxed standard was used during times of war, and then even after, which is probably a violation, if the truth be told, of our rights under the First Amendment. And so likewise, in the 1948 to 1955 range, there was this big communism scare because of the Soviet Union. And so we had what they called tail gunner Joe McCarthy in the Congress, and they were investigating everybody and asking, you know, why are you in a union? You're a movie maker, you're an actor, why do you need to be in a union? So they're immediately assuming that just because someone's in a union, even actors, they must be a communist. And so that was just his whole approach, drag people in. Great film out there called Majestic. I recommend that you view it. Perfect for this discussion. I might even throw a couple YouTube clips up there on the Majestic. He gets dragged in front of Congress. It's Jim Carrey. Great show. You know, it's neat. It's after World War II and just kind of a interesting time, but a bad time in a way for people. Anybody that had different ideas were in danger. Guys like me wouldn't have done well during that time period. So basically what we're talking about then, as we're moving up then, 1948-50 time, is this case Dennis versus United States. Just so you know, yes, I'm specifically skipping Whitney. I felt like that's just more of the same that we talked about in Get Low. So we're moving on now to Dennis versus United States. Going to talk a little bit about that one off of the Chapter 11 list. So on Dennis, you know, the full cite on that is 341 U.S. 494. It's a 1951 case. What we want to share with you is 1948. Communist Party members, leaders like this Dennis, were rounded up, arrested, and charged with violating what they called the Smith Act, which was one of these laws that was passed by this group, Tail Gunner Joe McCarthy and people like that, that made it unlawful to knowingly conspire to teach and advocate the overthrow of or destruction of the United States government. So here again, it was just a case of tendencies, not clear and present danger. In other words, no guns, no bombs, nothing like that. It's like somebody preaches from the pulpit, this government is so bad, needs to be overthrown. Well, in this day and age, they do that almost every Sunday. You know, I've seen it, I've heard it. It makes me mad, but it does happen, you know. Well, back in 1948, if even a preacher tried to do that, probably land in prison. So that's what was going on at this time. Mr. Dennis ended up in prison. Communist Party leaders, along with him, were in prison. I'll give you that full citation again. And you know what the outcome's going to be. 341 U.S. 494. It's a 1951 case. Well, here again, at this time, then it was a bad time to have different ideas. And, you know, most people don't agree with communism. I'm not saying I agree with communism, but I am saying there is a difference between a dangerous tendency and a clear and present danger. In other words, big difference between a piece of paper saying, hey, you know, this government's so bad, something ought to be done, kind of like an email or a Facebook post or something like that today, and someone saying, hey, I got a garage full of AK-47, you want to stop by and get one extra cheap, we're going to overthrow the government. Well, that's a lot different, you know. So they're actually making steps toward an overthrow of the government is different than just suggesting or throwing out an idea. Interesting that this actually could go back to another Indiana case that I've mentioned in the other class that we have on this, which is Con Law 1, and then that is a case from the Civil War. It's called Gilligan, or wait, what's it called? Let's see. Milligan. I've been watching Gilligan. Milligan versus the United States. Milligan versus the United States. Lincoln had this newspaper editor thrown in prison and threatened to hang him because he was writing editorials saying he didn't like Lincoln. Well, they said in a war zone, in times of war, then yes, you do have that power, but no, if it's in a peacetime area like Indiana that's not in the war, then no, you can't just round up people you don't like and throw them in jail. So that's kind of similar to some of this. There's just different shades of gray on this. A war that's more strident rights by the government to protect the government. You know, if you're in a peaceful area, it should be the citizens should have more rights. And so it's hard to decide, you know, which way that we're going to come down on a lot of this. So like I said, even though, you know, they were saying, yeah, well, there is a right to argue in favor of your freedom of speech, but unfortunately in times like these, when you're making even dangerous aspersions or threats against the government, then even if it isn't a clear and present danger, then we're going to put you in jail. And you know, so this is all going to change though in the 60s. Like I said earlier, case of Brandenburg versus Ohio. And I think I'm just going to share this video. It's short enough that I'm just going to share it on each of these so that you can kind of see that they all kind of fit together in these three forums. So focusing in on Brandenburg, then the question is, well, how is Brandenburg different than Dennis and Gitlow and the Schneck and the Eugene V. Debs case? And this is a Ku Klux Klan case. You know, he was a leader in Ohio, Brandenburg was. The case is 395 U.S. 444. It's a 1969 case. This all happened earlier, though, than 1969. Basically, what this guy did, he went on TV and basically was advocating the right of the Ku Klux Klan to assemble and threaten overturn of the government and this type thing. So, you know, did he have a right to protected speech? Was he allowed to make a speech at a Klan rally? Was the Klan allowed to assemble? And they basically said that a criminal syndicate could be prosecuted at the state level, but in an 8-vote margin out of 8, in other words, a unanimous margin, the court said, no, you cannot prosecute Brandenburg just for wanting to advocate that he has the right to say things that, even if it's somewhat dangerous tendency, it is not a clear and present danger. So the whole court basically flip-flopped on this issue in the 60s. And so basically where we are, this was during the Warren Court years, this Criminal Syndicalism Act was overturned as saying that any kind of advocating of doctrines that were a violation of a lot of our constitutional principles were allowed. You're allowed to say what you want to say as long as you don't start gathering up bombs and, you know, things like that. So this is a big change. Like I said again, 395 U.S. 444. And then the other one I want to bring to your attention once again is a little short case, but that's the Hess case. In the Hess case, it's a 1973 case, Hess versus Indiana. It's during the Berger Court, 414 U.S. 105, 1973. And this was a 6-3 vote, but it was 6 in favor of Hess and 3 against Hess, 3 in favor of the state of Indiana. The point of it is, in this opinion, 414 U.S. 105, this was a actual protest march at Indiana University. It's a protest rally on the streets of Bloomington, right outside Indiana University, and there was a protest against the Vietnam War. And so basically what they said, this kid was standing, Hess was standing next to a deputy sheriff, and he wisecracked and said, well, I mean, I don't care if they're forcing us off the streets today, we'll take the effing street tomorrow. And of course he didn't, you know, make it a family show like I'm trying to do here. He basically said the whole word. So basically what happened in that case was, here again, the vote was not as clear. It was 6-3, but they said that Hess did have the right to free speech, and using the F word is not a fighting word in the context of disorderly conduct. So here again, you cannot make laws like disorderly conduct laws that affect your ability to use free speech or free assembly, as long, once again, as it's not a clear threat against that person. He wasn't even saying the F word to the deputy. He was using it in the context of the street. And so I think that's important. Other cases have come out in Ohio and other places where the use of the F word is pretty generally allowed, and this is not disorderly conduct. Now, the other thing that comes up in this, though, and we'll talk more about this later, is what about the amplitude or the loudness of using that word? If you're just yelling, screaming at all different hours, days, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, well, then we get into a whole nother area. My mother always taught me that my rights extended to the end of my nose. So if I'm yelling, screaming so loudly that it's making it a bother for a lot of other people, then the tide turns in favor of the other people's rights. And so we'll see how that comes about in later cases. Well, hey, here again, hope you enjoyed this. I've covered 3 cases this time. But like I say, I'm going to show you that they all have little differences, and we see how times are changing as we get further along in time. So hope this helps you to try to better understand that this has evolved with time and how there's little nuances and differences think this whole wording, clear and present danger, which is on your vocabulary list, is very important, and I think you need to consider that just to make sure that you understand the difference between a dangerous tendency and the clear and present danger. Okay, well, hey, thank you. I'll be back with you later.